Why is a man sitting completely alone, calmly waiting, while his ex-fiancée humiliates him in front of a packed restaurant and smiling like he knows something she doesn't? It starts with a dessert. A single candle flickers on top of it, and written in delicate chocolate script across the plate are three words: Happy Anniversary. Micah Carter sits alone at a corner table, his jacket pressed, his hands folded, his eyes fixed on the empty chair across from him. The restaurant hums with quiet conversation and clinking glasses, but at his table, there is only silence and a candle burning down toward its wick. He checks his watch. He does not check his phone. He simply waits. The way a man waits when he has learned, through hard experience, that some things are worth waiting for. Then the door opens, and the air in the room seems to shift. Vanessa Mitchell walks in on the arm of a man in a tailored charcoal suit, her laughter already loud before she has fully crossed the threshold. She does not expect to see him. She has not thought about him in months, or so she tells herself. But there he is, sitting by the window, a candlelit dessert glowing in front of an empty seat, and something about the sight of it, a grown man alone with an anniversary dessert, strikes her as unbearably funny. She approaches before her date can stop her.
Still doing this, Micah?
She says, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, her voice dressed in mock sympathy. Ordering yourself a little anniversary treat so you don't have to admit nobody's coming? She laughs and a few heads turn. Some things never change. Micah does not raise his voice. He does not even fully turn his head toward her. He simply looks at the candle, calm as still water, and says nothing at all. His silence should feel like defeat. It doesn't. There is something in the stillness of his hands, in the patience of his posture, that makes the moment feel less like an ending and more like the last few seconds before a door swings open. Vanessa doesn't know that yet. She thinks she has the final word. She thinks she knows exactly who Micah Carter is. She has no idea how wrong she's about to be. Before we find out who he's really waiting for, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. To understand this moment, we have to go back. Not weeks, not months. 3 years, to a version of Micah who still believed love and ambition could grow in the same soil without one strangling the other. 3 years earlier, Micah Carter was a man with a plan and very little else. He worked long hours at a packaging design firm by day and sketched prototypes by lamplight at night, dreaming of a company that didn't yet exist, one built on sustainable, elegant packaging for the beauty industry, materials that wouldn't outlive their usefulness in a landfill for the next 400 years. He believed, with the stubborn faith of a man who has nothing but conviction, that the beauty industry was standing on the edge of a change it didn't yet know it needed. Vanessa believed in him too, back then. She was warm and quick-witted, the kind of woman who filled a room simply by walking into it, and she had fallen for Micah precisely because he dreamed bigger than his bank account allowed. She used to sit across from him at their small kitchen table, tracing the edges of his sketches with her fingertip, telling him this was the one, this idea, this plan, this life they were building together. He proposed on a Tuesday because he couldn't wait for a special occasion to ask her. He didn't have the money for an elaborate ring or an elaborate moment, only a small diamond and an honest sentence. I don't have much yet, but I have you, and I have this dream, and I want to build both of them with you. She said yes before he even finished the question. For a while, it was enough. They planned a wedding on a modest budget, choosing a small venue with string lights instead of chandeliers. They talked about the future in the easy, unguarded way people do when they still believe the future is simply theirs for the taking. Micah worked on his prototypes at night. Vanessa cheered him on, calling him relentless in the way that made the words sound like a compliment. Then reality began to press in, slowly at first, the way water finds the smallest crack before it splits the stone entirely. His first serious prototype, a compostable, elegant compact made from mushroom-based material, was rejected by 3 separate manufacturers who told him, kindly but firmly, that it wasn't cost-effective. An investor he'd been courting for months finally agreed to a meeting, listened for 20 minutes, and told him the market wasn't ready for what he was selling. The bank denied his loan application. A boutique skincare line that had promised to be his first client backed out at the last moment, citing budget constraints. Each rejection was small on its own. Together, they became a weight. The wedding, once planned for spring, was quietly pushed to autumn, then pushed again. Anniversaries of their engagement passed with quiet dinners instead of celebrations, because there wasn't money for anything more, and Micah was too proud to borrow what he couldn't repay. He started missing dinners altogether, staying late at a co-working space that charged him more than he could comfortably afford, chasing one more meeting, one more lead, one more chance. Vanessa's parents, who had liked Micah well enough in the beginning, began to ask harder questions at every family dinner. "What exactly is the plan, if this doesn't work?" her father would ask, not unkindly, but pointedly. Her friends, meaning well in their own way, began repeating a phrase that slowly worked its way under her skin like a splinter. "Love doesn't pay bills." She started to believe them. It wasn't that she stopped loving Micah. That was the tragedy of it. The part she would only understand much later: she never stopped loving him. She stopped believing that loving him was enough to build a life on. The dream that once felt like an adventure had begun to feel, to her, like a slow-motion collision she couldn't see the end of. She grew tired of explaining his ambition to people who only saw his lack of results. She grew tired of postponed dates and empty savings accounts, and a fiancé who was always one meeting away from a breakthrough that never quite arrived. One evening, she sat across from him at that same small kitchen table where she had once traced his sketches with wonder, and instead she slid the ring toward him. "I can't keep waiting for a version of you that might never exist," she said, her voice breaking on the last word despite her effort to keep it steady. "I love you, Micah. I really do. But I don't think I love the life this is turning into." Micah didn't argue. He didn't beg. He simply nodded, because some part of him, the part that had watched rejection after rejection pile up around him like debris, understood exactly what she meant, even if it broke something in him to hear it. He watched her pack a life's worth of shared plans into 2 suitcases, and he let her go, because holding on to someone who no longer believed in the destination felt crueler than letting them leave. That night, alone in an apartment that suddenly felt enormous, Micah made himself a single promise. He would not let this be the end of the story. Not because he needed to prove Vanessa wrong, because he still believed, in the quiet, stubborn way that had gotten him this far, that the dream was worth finishing even if he had to finish it alone. For months afterward, little changed. The rejections continued, the savings dwindled further. But Micah kept sketching, kept refining, kept showing up to meetings that mostly ended in polite dismissals. Persistence, he was learning, rarely looks like triumph while it's happening. Mostly, it looks like showing up again the next day, for no reason anyone else can see. Then, on an ordinary Thursday, everything changed. An email arrived from a fast-growing Korean beauty company searching for a new packaging partner, one willing to commit fully to sustainable materials, even at a premium cost. Most packaging firms Micah knew would have balked at the constraints. Micah read the requirements twice, then a third time, and felt something in his chest that he hadn't felt in over a year. Hope, sharp and sudden as a struck match. He had 1 week to prepare for the meeting. He spent it the way he spent every important moment of his life, completely, without holding anything back. He researched the company's founder relentlessly. Han Ji-eun, a woman who had built her beauty brand from a single product line into an international name in under 6 years, known in industry circles for 2 things: an uncompromising eye for quality and an almost unheard-of insistence on ethical sourcing, even when it cost her market share. Somewhere in his research, Micah found a video of her greeting a room of investors in her native language before switching seamlessly into English, and something about the gesture, small, respectful, deliberate, struck him. He decided, against the advice of a friend who told him it was unnecessary, that he would greet her the same way. He practiced the phrase all night. "Annyeonghaseyo, chuum buphaseum nida." It is nice to meet you for the first time. He repeated it in the mirror, in the shower, in the elevator on the way up to her office, his palms sweating despite the air conditioning. When he finally stood in front of Han Ji-eun, in a glass-walled office overlooking a skyline he had only ever seen in photographs, every syllable he had rehearsed abandoned him at once. What came out of his mouth was a mangled, breathless attempt that landed somewhere between the phrase he intended and something that meant, roughly, nothing at all. For one unbearable second, silence. Then Han Ji-eun laughed, not the polite, professional laugh she reserved for investors, but a real one, unguarded and warm, the kind of laugh that surprised even her. She pressed a hand briefly to her mouth, composing herself, and looked at him with something new in her expression. "That," she said, "was terrible. but no one has ever tried that hard to say it to me before. She gestured for him to sit. Most people don't bother learning even one word. You learned an entire sentence and still failed spectacularly. I respect that. It was not the meeting he had rehearsed for, but somehow it was better. The conversation that followed had none of the guarded formality Micah had braced himself for. Han Ji-eun asked pointed questions about his materials, his sourcing, his production timelines, and Micah answered honestly, even when the honest answer wasn't the one investors typically wanted to hear. Our competitors could match your price if you use synthetic laminate instead of the mushroom composite, she said, testing him, watching his reaction carefully. It would cut your production costs by nearly a third. Why haven't you switched? Micah didn't hesitate. Because if I use cheaper materials today, your customers won't notice today, but they'll remember your brand tomorrow, and not for the reason you want them to. I'd rather lose this contract telling you the truth than win it by cutting corners you'll regret in a year. Han Ji-eun studied him for a long moment, the kind of look that seemed to weigh far more than the words that had just been spoken. Then she reached for a pen. I've had a dozen packaging firms in this office promising me the moon, she said, sliding a contract across the table. You're the first one who told me something I didn't want to hear. That's rare. I don't intend to lose it. Micah signed the partnership with a hand that was not entirely steady, aware even then that something larger than a business deal had just begun. The partnership grew faster than either of them expected. Factory visits turned into long working dinners. Late-night calls about production timelines stretched into conversations about everything and nothing childhood memories. The pressure of building something from scratch, the particular loneliness of being the person everyone depends on. Han Ji-eun, it turned out, understood that loneliness better than almost anyone Micah had ever met. Weeks into the partnership, after a grueling factory walkthrough that had run 4 hours over schedule, she handed him a paper cup of coffee from a vending machine in the hallway, the only thing available at that hour. It's terrible coffee, she admitted, but you look like you need it more than you need good taste right now. He laughed a real laugh, the first one in longer than he cared to admit, and took the cup. After the year I've had, he said, terrible coffee from someone who actually shows up might be the best thing I've been offered in a while. She didn't ask what he meant by that, but something in the way she looked at him told him she understood anyway. Over the following months, the rhythm of their partnership deepened into something neither of them named out loud. She began remembering small details about his life, the anniversary of his company's first rejected pitch, which he still marked privately every year, half joke and half reminder of how far he'd come. He began noticing things about her too, the way she softened, almost imperceptibly, whenever a shipment of new product launched successfully, as if she never quite let herself believe success would come until it was sitting in front of her. The Korean greeting became a private joke between them, resurrected at unexpected moments. When a shipment was delayed and tempers ran short on a factory floor, Micah would turn to her, deadpan, and attempt the phrase again, always slightly wrong, always enough to make her laugh despite herself, and diffuse the tension in the room. When his material supplier fell through weeks before a launch and panic threatened to take over the office, she looked at him across the chaos and said simply, "Say it again." He did, badly, and for just a moment the room remembered how to breathe. It became their language for a very specific kind of comfort, not a way of avoiding hard moments, but a way of surviving them together. Their first product launch under the new partnership sold out within days, a compostable line of premium packaging that industry publications called a genuine shift in how the beauty world thought about sustainability. Han Ji-eun's company's stock climbed. Micah's small firm, once turned away by 3 separate manufacturers, was suddenly fielding calls from companies who had rejected him a year earlier. He didn't gloat. He didn't need to. He simply kept working, kept refining, kept showing up the same way he always had. The only difference now was that someone finally stood beside him, instead of watching from a distance, waiting for him to fail. It was Han Ji-eun who first said it plainly. On a night after a launch celebration, when the office had emptied and only the two of them remained among stacks of product samples and half-finished paperwork, "I've built a company around not trusting people easily," she said, not looking at him directly. "It's cost me relationships. It's made me difficult to work with, difficult to love, if I'm honest. But I trust you. I don't fully understand why, except that you've never once told me what I wanted to hear instead of what was true." Micah set down the sample he'd been holding. "Maybe that's not a small thing," he said quietly. Maybe that's the whole thing. She finally looked at him. Maybe it is. Neither of them said the word love that night. They didn't need to. It had been building for months, in coffee shared after long meetings, in factory floors and product launches, and a mangled greeting that had somehow become the truest language between them. When Micah finally kissed her, weeks later, on a rooftop overlooking a city that had rejected him more times than he could count, it felt less like a beginning and more like an arrival, as though they had both been walking toward this exact moment without quite admitting it to themselves. Their relationship, when it became public, drew immediate attention. A billionaire beauty CEO and the packaging entrepreneur she'd once nearly refused to meet with reporters loved the story, and they asked about it constantly, at every interview, every press event, every product launch. "How did you two actually meet?" a reporter asked once. Microphone extended, cameras rolling. Han Ji-eun's eyes lit up every single time the question came, without fail. "He tried to greet me in Korean," she said, barely containing her smile. "He got it completely wrong. It was the worst attempt I had ever heard." Micah, beside her, would duck his head, feigning embarrassment that had long since become performance. "It wasn't that bad. It was catastrophic," she'd correct, delighted, and refused to let the story die no matter how many times he protested. It became their signature, retold in interview after interview, magazine profile after magazine profile, proof to anyone watching that this was a partnership built not on image, but on something real enough to survive being laughed about in public 100 times over. And whenever one of them faced a hard day, a failed negotiation, a product recall scare, the particular exhaustion of running two growing companies at once, the other would find them, wherever they were, and say the same four words. "Now greet me in Korean." It never failed. Micah would sigh, feign reluctance, and say it anyway, still slightly wrong after all this time, and for a moment, whatever weight either of them carried would lift, just enough to keep going. No long speeches were needed, just their language, spoken badly and lovingly, over and over again. Years passed this way. Han Ji-eun's company expanded into new markets across 3 continents. Micah's firm grew alongside it, no longer the desperate operation scraping together rejected pitches, but a respected name in its own right, built on a reputation neither of them had to manufacture. It had simply been earned, one honest decision at a time. Neither of them rescued the other. They built, side by side, the way people build something meant to last. Which brings us back to the restaurant, to the candlelit dessert, to Vanessa standing over Micah's table with a satisfied smile on her face, certain she had just witnessed the quiet collapse of a man she once left behind. She has no idea what's coming through that door. Micah checks his watch again, and this time, there's the faintest suggestion of a smile at the corner of his mouth, not for Vanessa, who is still waiting for a reaction that isn't coming, but for something happening just beyond the restaurant's front windows. Headlights sweep across the glass. A line of dark SUVs pulls up outside, drawing the attention of nearly every table in the room. The doors open in careful, practiced sequence. Vanessa turns to look along with everyone else, curiosity overtaking her satisfaction for just a moment. Han Ji-eun walks in. She moves the way she always moves, unhurried, certain, every eye in the room adjusting to her presence without her needing to ask for it. She doesn't glance at Vanessa. She doesn't glance at anyone else in the restaurant at all. Her eyes go directly to the corner table, to the man who has been sitting alone, patiently, for the better part of 20 minutes. She crosses the room in a handful of steps, leans down, and kisses him gently. "Happy anniversary, love," she says, soft enough that it's meant only for him, though half the restaurant hears it anyway. "I'm sorry I'm late, the board meeting ran long." Micah's hand finds hers without effort, the motion of 2 people who have done this 1,000 times before. "You're here now," he says. "That's all that matters." She glances down at the dessert between them. The candle burned low, the chocolate script still legible across the plate. Her expression softens into something unmistakably tender. "They remembered," she says. "Looks like they did," Micah answers. "And there's real warmth in it, the private amusement of 2 people who have shared this particular dessert, at this particular restaurant, on this particular date, for longer than anyone else in the room could possibly guess. Only now does it become clear to the room, to Vanessa, to everyone who briefly mistook a candlelit dessert for a lonely man's quiet delusion, that it had never been a pretense at all. It had been exactly what it appeared to be. A man waiting, patiently, for the woman he loved. Vanessa stands frozen a few feet away, the satisfied smile long gone from her face, replaced by something far more complicated. Her date shifts uncomfortably beside her, sensing the moment has shifted into territory that no longer belongs to either of them. She opens her mouth as if to say something, then closes it again, because there is nothing left to say that wouldn't sound exactly as small as she suddenly feels. She had believed, for 3 years, that Micah's dream was the thing that would eventually break him, that his refusal to compromise, his stubborn insistence on doing things the honest way, even when it cost him everything, was a flaw she had been right to walk away from. Standing there now, watching him laugh quietly with a woman the entire business world recognized on sight, she understands, with a clarity that arrives too late to change anything, exactly how wrong she had been. Micah didn't need someone to rescue him from his own ambition. He needed someone who could see the whole shape of what he was building before it was finished. Someone who believed the unfinished version of him was already worth staying for. Vanessa had wanted the man he might one day become, once all the risk had been resolved and all the uncertainty removed. Han Ji-eun had wanted the man sitting in front of her, exactly as he was, still building, still uncertain, still trying, and had chosen to build alongside him, instead of waiting safely on the sidelines for guaranteed success. That, in the end, had made all the difference. Vanessa turns and walks back to her table without another word, her earlier confidence nowhere to be found. Whatever she came to say has evaporated entirely, replaced by the quiet, uncomfortable weight of watching someone become exactly who they always said they would be without her. At the corner table, Micah and Ji-eun linger a while longer over the last of the dessert, trading the easy, unhurried conversation of two people who have built an entire life out of small moments like this one. When they finally rise to leave, her hand finds his the way it always does, familiar and certain. "Now," she says, a mischievous glint in her eye as they step toward the door. Micah groans, already knowing exactly what's coming. "Seriously? Here?" She nods, entirely unbothered by his protest, waiting. He exhales, glances briefly around the restaurant, and says it the same phrase he practiced so desperately 3 years earlier, the one that once fell apart in his mouth in front of her office window. This time, every syllable lands exactly where it should, clean and correct, years of quiet practice finally paying off in a moment that no longer needs to impress anyone. Ji-eun smiles, the same smile she gave him the very first time he got it wrong. "I still like the first one better," she says. He laughs, and so does she, the sound of it easy and unguarded, the sound of two people who have weathered enough together to no longer need anything from each other, except exactly this laughter, honesty, and the quiet certainty of a hand that will always be there to hold. They walk out together into the evening, past the line of waiting SUVs, past a restaurant full of strangers who will never know the full story of what they just witnessed, past a woman at another table who finally understands, far too late, the difference between loving someone's potential and believing in it enough to stay. The truth Micah's story leaves behind is a simple one, though it took him years of rejection and loss to fully understand it himself. The right person does not arrive once you have already succeeded, drawn in by the comfort of your finished achievements. The right person arrives while you are still becoming, while the outcome is still uncertain, while the dream is still fragile enough to fail, while there is still every reason in the world to walk away. They stay anyway, not because they know how the story ends, but because they believe the person in front of them is worth finding out. Vanessa loved a version of Micah she wanted to exist. Ji-eun believed in the version that was already standing in front of her, unfinished and uncertain, and chose to help him build the rest. That is the difference between being left and being found. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who loves meaningful stories. We'll see you in our next unforgettable journey.